The Burning of Black Wall Street by Gabby, Annika, Paulina, Kaim, and Kevin.
How does the events of Black Wall Street correlate with the structure of a contemporary democracy? This question is designed to be answered throughout our presentation, meaning that you'll be gathering thoughts and ideas on how you may see the events of Black Wall Street correlating with the structure of our contemporary democracy. This question will be revisited later on at the end of our presentation. I hope that you enjoy the rest of our presentation, and I'll see you later.
Life for Black Americans in the Roaring Twenties. Picture this, the closing chapter of World War I. Over 400,000 Black Americans, facing the harsh realities of segregation within the military, stand at the forefront of valor. The war's conclusion ushers in both hope and challenges as these veterans return home. The nation, too, stands at a crossroads, grappling with the winds of change and a shifting narrative surrounding the role of Black individuals in American society. Fast forward to the Roaring Twenties, a dynamic period where the reverberations of cultural upheaval collide with societal shifts. Jazz, born in the crucible of the African American experience, emerges as the heartbeat of this transformative era. It transcends mere musical expression. It becomes a cultural revolution. Icons like Louis Armstrong rise to prominence, shaping the sound of a generation and leaving an indelible mark on the fabric of American culture. Envision Smokey's jazz clubs, the intoxicating syncopation of a saxophone, and the electric energy of swing dancing. The jazz scene becomes more than a musical phenomenon. It evolves into a movement that defies racial and social boundaries. From the vibrant streets of Harlem to the clandestine speakeasies of Chicago, jazz becomes the soundtrack of rebellion and liberation, setting the stage for a cultural revolution that will echo through decades. Amid the vibrant jazz culture, a silent revolution unfolds in the socio-economic landscape, giving birth to the growth of the Black middle class. The Roaring Twenties, synonymous with cultural dynamism, also witnesses transformative economic opportunities for Black Americans. The Great Migration, a significant movement from rural South to urban North, fuels job opportunities, leading to the establishment of a Black middle class. This era's economic progress goes hand in hand with a cultural renaissance. Musicians and singers like Louis Armstrong, who rose from humble beginnings in New Orleans, embody the spirit of the time. The rise of the Black middle class during the Roaring Twenties lays a crucial foundation for future civil rights movements. Economic empowerment provides the community with a platform to advocate for broader social and political change. It's a period of progress where the rhythm of economic opportunity harmonizes with the jazz beat of cultural expression, forging a legacy that would echo through the corridors of history.
In light of the progress and cultural successes for Black Americans in the United States, these achievements were shadowed by hatred and racism. While African Americans faced much discrimination in the North and West of the United States, it paled in comparison to the hatred they faced in the Jim Crow South. In the South, African Americans were barred from attending the same schools, sitting in the same places, and even using the same public bathrooms as whites. At the same time, violence in the southern states against African Americans grew as groups like the KKK went about lynching and shooting African Americans with no repercussions. The violence not only made Black people fear for their lives, but also discouraged them from voting and participating in elected offices. From the 1910s to 1920s, 1.5 million African Americans from the Jim Crow South became refugees to the northern and western cities like New York, Illinois, Los Angeles, and the Pacific Northwest.
In 1905, Tulsa, Oklahoma, discovered that there was a small pool of oil, which is the richest small oil field in the world. This brings attention to many Americans. Black and white migrated to Oklahoma to start their life better with oil production company. They travel in wagons, trains, tag-alongs, any way they can to take this opportunity. O.W. Gurley was a Black man who migrated in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was the very first Black-owned business and founded the Greenwood district. Greenwood is an establishment for Black communities. Greenwood is also named as Black Wall Street for its Black community. J.B. Stratford and a Black man who lived in Greenwood and O.W. Gurley worked together to make an opportunity for Blacks to be wealthy landowners. and entrepreneurs. It is a place where Black can live comfortably and to thrive their business. Blacks were able to find jobs or expand their career. Greenwood had dozens of doctors, surgeons, lawyers, and the very first Black-owned photography studio. Because Black and whites at the time don't have a good relationship with one another, Blacks started their own trade inside of Greenwood. They would not trade with whites. Andrew Jackson Smith worked as an attorney and a journalist. He and J.B. Stratford worked together and created the Tulsa Star newspaper. It was the first Black daily newspaper in Oklahoma. It demonstrated their achievement at the time, like white newspaper, telling about Black crimes. September 1919, there was a rise of racial terror in the country, riots and brutality breaking out. By 1921, racial terror reached Tulsa, Oklahoma. With the amount of success that Greenwood achieved, creating a company making their own newspaper, white supremacy is filled with jealousy with their success. This racial terror in Tulsa led to the Tulsa Race Massacre.
The Tulsa Race Massacre took place in the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921 and lasted 2 days. On May 31st, a young Black man named Dick Rowland got arrested for allegedly assaulting a white woman. There was no evidence that tied him to this incident, yet the Tulsa Tribune, the local newspaper, posted an editorial that afternoon which called for the lynching of Rowland. Community members of the Greenwood district felt the need to protect this young man and decided that they would step up. Most of these community members were World War I veterans, and they armed themselves in order to defend themselves as well as Rowland. However, the sheriff turned them away as they tried to enter the building. That's when the shooting breaks out while a white man tries to unarm a Black man. This shooting would last throughout the night and into the next day. The next morning, on June 1st, a mob of white men and boys flooded the Greenwood district, shooting and killing Black people, looting and burning their homes and businesses. The Black residents tried to fight back, but they were greatly outnumbered and outgunned and did not stand a chance. At the end, the mob had destroyed 35 square blocks of Greenwood and burned down 1,200 homes, over 60 businesses, a school, a hospital, a public library, and a dozen of churches. Besides burning down homes, they also looted hundreds of homes. The death toll is estimated to be around 300 people, but it might be higher as not everybody got recorded. 2 weeks later, the Tulsa City Commission issued a report in which they stated that let the blame for this Negro uprising lie right where it belongs, on those armed Negroes and their followers who started this trouble and who instigated it, and any persons who seek to put half the blame on the white people are wrong. It was in order to try to defend what had happened and protect the white community while harming the Black community even further.
So, what is the future of Black Wall Street, and what does that future look like? So, after the Tulsa Race Massacre, Black Wall Street faced very serious structural and economic devastation, which is actually still very apparent in today's time. And so, as a result of what had occurred, many efforts have been made by the residents to attempt to rebuild the Greenwood district. But that, of course, did not come without its own sets of challenges. So, one instance, insurance claims were actually filed by the residents of the Tulsa area in relation to the riots, requesting around $2.7 million in financial support to attempt to rebuild the Greenwood district. Those claims were mostly rejected, except one white business owner receiving compensation for the guns that were taken from his shop during the massacre. And as a result of many of these residents facing these hurdles in terms of them trying to receive financial support to rebuild the Greenwood district, they were forced to rebuild it on their own, meaning they had to salvage what was remaining of their businesses or their houses, and sometimes they didn't even have housing. They were living in tents, and they were having to salvage what was remaining and attempt to rebuild the Greenwood district. And that actually had occurred. There was some rebuilding that had taken place, meaning there was some level of success, but around the 1930s to 40s to 60s, there was actually demolition that was done to the area once again, being called the second destruction of Greenwood. And as a result of what had occurred, there have been many people saying that the survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre should be receiving reparations for what they have endured, as most of them have not received any kind of financial support for what had happened during the massacre. The most recent attempt at trying to rebuild the Greenwood district to what it once was prior to the massacre was actually a GoFundMe created in 2020 in order to raise awareness about the Greenwood district area and hopefully raising money to rebuild the Greenwood district. And so moving on to the two photos that I presented, on the left-hand side, you can see that the Williams Dreamland Theater, which was built prior to the massacre, was a pretty successful part of the Black Wall Street. And this theater was completely destroyed during the massacre, but fun fact, it was actually rebuilt after the massacre, but it was again destroyed in the 1960s by Tulsa city planners, which you can see on the right-hand side being the most current photo of that area. And so moving on to the final part of the presentation, Black Wall Street and Contemporary Democracy. So restating the question that I asked earlier, how does the events of Black Wall Street correlate with the structure of contemporary democracy? And so to be able to respond to this question, it is important to acknowledge the events in our history that contribute to the structure of our democracy and reflect upon how that has taken place. And so mainly looking at the events of the Tulsa Race Massacre within Black Wall Street, we can see that economical disparities and racial discriminations took place. And as a result of us not acknowledging these events that are in our history that contribute to the structure of our democracy, such as the Tulsa Race Massacre, we are then contributing to the continuation of the systemic issues that we're still seeing in our contemporary democracy, such as economical disparities and, of course, racial discrimination. And so being able to acknowledge what is happening in our history correlates with being able to see what is the issues that we're still seeing in our contemporary democracy, specifically the structure of it. An actual example of us moving towards acknowledging Black Wall Street and specifically the massacre is looking at how Oklahoma public schools are including it in their history curriculum. And there are people who are publicly calling out what had occurred during the massacre and talking about how the narrative was actually shifted for a time after the massacre as a method that was done in an attempt to hide what had occurred during the massacre. And one major takeaway that I can give is being able to acknowledge the economic disparities and racial discrimination that took place within the Tulsa Race Massacre correlates with the importance on how we address the issues that we are still seeing happening within our contemporary democracy. So, reflecting upon our history correlates with the awareness of how we can address the structure of our contemporary democracy or the roots of what is causing the issues that we're still seeing within our contemporary democracy. So, we have reached the end of the video presentation, and thank you for listening.